I think what's really interesting and what really needs exploration, and I can give you one perspective, I'm sure there are many others, is, Shabbos candles and Chanukah candles. And I think in the back of your minds, everyone here knows that Shabbos candles are sort of viewed as a woman's thing. It's not really a woman's thing, and a man is just as obligated to light Shabbos candles as a woman, and if a man is alone, for whatever reason, temporarily long-term, he does have a full obligation to light Shabbos candles, make a bracha. It's his mitzvah just the way it's a woman's mitzvah. But it's sort of viewed as a woman's thing. In the world as a whole, and in halachic observance in most homes, the woman lights the candles for the home. And the other side of the equation is, although this is a little bit more fluid, Chanukah candles in large sections of the community is viewed as a man's thing. Now, there are many homes today and which women light as well. But by and large, it really historically has been a man's thing. In my home, I thank God I have a number of sons, I thank God I have a daughter, I have a wife. Come Chanukah, I'm the big cheese. It's me and the boys, and my wife and my daughter are second fiddle. But come Shabbos candles, they're the big cheese, and we're second fiddle. And the truth is, it's 52-8. So in the greater scheme of who is a bigger cheese, we can debate, but she might come out ahead. But really, why did it evolve this way? What's going on here? So, truth be told, it's very interesting to know that we really need to have a perspective on what the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles is. And let's start with one basic question. And that basic question is it a means to an end, or is it an end unto itself? And let me explain that. That's just fancy phraseology. Is the mitzvah, using Gemara parlance, the mitzvah of lighting the candles, or is the mitzvah of having candles lit? And if you want to use Gemara phraseology, the phraseology would be Hadlaka osa mitzvah, hanuka osa mitzvah. Hadlaka, does it have to be lit? Is it an active mitzvah, or do you simply need candles burning? Let me explain. Let me sort of give examples. So there's a Chazon Ish that I start with on the top of the sheet. But the Chazon Ish, interestingly enough, talks about candles in the Beis HaMikdash, where he really points out having the candles burning in the Beis HaMikdash, or the Mishnah before that, this was sacrosanct, this was absolutely critical. But it wasn't so much that you had to light the candles, they have to be lit. And so he goes ahead and says, Ikra mitzvah sheyeh ner daluk, that the candles should be burning, afilu hadliko kof, even if a monkey or a machine or an Mon Jul or anybody lit those candles, they would work. Now, I would not suggest bringing a monkey into the Beis HaMikdash to light the candles, but conceptually it works because you just need them burning. A timer might even work. This could really go ahead, and please God, when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, you can go ahead and talk to someone about setting up some type of timing system. It might, go ahead and create some kohanic unemployment, but conceptually it's really a means to an end. And for example, having the lights burning in this room could be a timer, turn them on. I don't know who turned them on, but the objective in turning the lights on in this room is not the holy act of turning the lights on. It's the holy act of having them burning so that we can learn Holy Torah, right? So it's not so much the medium that getting there that you focus on, it's the end result. How do we view Chanukah candles? Is the mitzvah lighting the candles, and then once lit you have to let them burn, or is the mitzvah that they should be lit, and who really cares who lights them? Okay? So I'll tell you, it's really a great debate, okay, in the Gemara. Go to the fourth source from the top, where the Gemara really discusses this. So it's the Gemara in Shabbos, Tavchav Beis and Beis. Fourth source, do you see? Tibaylahu. And if anyone doesn't have a sheet, there really should be more than enough to go around. There's some more on this table. Tibaylahu, there was a great debate. Hadlaka osa mitzvah. Is it the lighting that creates the mitzvah? O hanuka osa mitzvah. That means, are we really concerned that the lighting happens in a religiously approved way? Lit by somebody who has to light, lit with proper intent, lit the right way? Or do we not really care about the lighting? We just care that the candle should be burning. In the Beis HaMikdash, we really didn't care who lit or how it was lit or whether it was lit in a halachically appropriate way. You need the lights burning. In this room, you don't really care who turned on the electric lights. I don't think it's a holy task here at the Bayit turning on the lights, is it? Okay? By us, it's not. Could be you're holier than we are. I would suspect it's not a holy task. The objective is the candles should be burning. The lights should be burning. So that would be hanachos, the mitzvah. We're concerned later that it should be placed appropriately, that it should be displayed appropriately, that it should burn. But how it's lit, when it's lit, it's immaterial. That would be one approach. But the other approach is that we actually care about the lighting. The lighting is an act of mitzvah. It's something valuable. And the truth is we really go back and forth. There's a debate back and forth, but Shulchan Aruch does go ahead and come to a psak. And that's the second source from the top, where Shulchan Aruch says we view the lighting of Chanukah Licht as an act of mitzvah. It's not just that you need the candles burning. It's not just that you need the lights. You need that when they're lit, they should be lit in a halachically appropriate way. And so, second source from the top, Shulchan Aruch goes ahead and tells us, Avala medlika cheresh shot v'katan. Chereshot v'katan are the prototypical people who aren't halachically obligated to do a mitzvah. Shot is someone who just doesn't have mental awareness. Katan is a child. Cheresh is also a deaf mute who in that world didn't have any awareness. There was no way to communicate with a person like that. And again, that person didn't have halachic responsibility. So these three people are people who don't have halachic responsibility. If they light the candles, it's not halachically appropriate, which means, strictly speaking, in your house, candles need to be lit. It's true, in many homes, many members of the family light. But strictly speaking, you only need one set of candles burning. And the question is, do those candles need to be lit by a person who has halachic obligations? In the Beis HaMikdash, it didn't. Anyone who could go ahead and light the candles in the Beis HaMikdash, that would qualify. In this room, the lights that are burning that allow us to have the session we're having, we don't really care who lit those lights. As long as you have lights, you're good to go, right? You're fine. But it seems that when it comes to Chanukah Licht, we don't just need the candles burning. We need them lit in a halachically appropriate way, in a halachically significant way. And therefore, someone who isn't part of the halachic envelope, who isn't obligated, a chereshot of a katan, or a non-Jew for that matter, if that person goes ahead and lights, it really doesn't count as a mitzvah. Okay? It's not a mitzvah, because you don't just need the end, you need that the means should also be done in a halachically appropriate way. And so the question that then begs to be asked is what is our perspective on women? We know that, there are lots of mitzvahs in the Torah. There are 613 mitzvahs. But we also know that women are exempt from some mitzvahs. The positive, time-oriented mitzvahs that have to be done at a specific time, women are exempt from. Like lulav, women don't have to take lulav. Like shofar, women don't have to hear shofar. They should, it's great if they do. If they hear it, they make a bracha. But it wasn't placed on them in a halachically obligatory way. It's just not their halachic obligation. It's actually not that many mitzvahs. How many mitzvahs do you think fall into this category from which women are exempted? If you would just pick a number out of a hat, what would you pick? Guy mitzvahs. Mitzvahs that really aren't obligatory for women. In our sexist Torah that really cuts women out of the envelope, how many mitzvahs fall into that category out of the 613?
7.
You would pick 7. Big group here. There's got to be a different perspective. What would you pick? So I'll tell you, the mitzvah difference between Kohen and Yisrael, Kohanim have mitzvahs that Yisraelim are excluded from, not just exempted, are about 200. So there's a 200 mitzvah difference between Kohen and Yisrael. What would you say the, man-woman divide is? You're saying 7. And no one else brave enough to offer a number? Somebody make it exciting. I came all the way up from down south. Any at the perspective here?
Yeah, 100.
You would say 100. You would say 600. So you're sort of on one side of the extreme. You're on the other side. You're actually right. It's about 12. It's hard to compute. It's really not that significant. Okay, about. But either which way. So at first glance, you would say Chanukah falls into that category, right? That just the way women are exempt from lulav and shofar, and why are they exempt from those mitzvahs? Because those are specific mitzvahs that need to be done at a specific time in a way that involves activity, positive time-oriented mitzvahs, and the Torah went ahead and exempted women for whatever reason, familial responsibilities, let us assume. You would assume Chanukah Licht fall into that category. category. You've got to light Chanukah licht in a specific place, specific time. It involves activity. You would assume that women are exempt, but the answer is, of course, that they're not exempt. Women actually are obligated in Chanukah licht, and the reason they're obligated is because, they were really affected by the Chanukah story in a significant way. So they can really go ahead and light for the house just the way a man can. And that really lies here in Shulchan Aruch. Again, Shulchan Aruch goes ahead and tells you that Chanukah licht are hugely different than the candles burning in this room, than the candles that would burn in the Beis HaMikdash. It's not just that you have to achieve an end result, you need an act of mitzvah. And therefore, they need to be created, they need to be crafted by someone who can create that mitzvah, someone who belongs there, someone who this mitzvah is applicable to. A child does it, or someone who isn't mentally well, or a non-Jew does it, it wouldn't count. It'll be pretty, but it wouldn't count as a mitzvah. And Shulchan Aruch makes a point of excluding these people. But a woman can, because she's as obligated as a man is. Okay? So it's very much a woman's obligation, just the way it's a man's obligation. Nevertheless, and so go a little bit ahead to the fifth source from the top, where again I pulled Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch tells you, okay, Isha madlekes ner Chanukah, fifth source, you see, Tess. Isha madlekes ner Chanukah, a woman lights ner Chanukah, shafi chayeves ba, because she's as obligated as a man is, okay? And therefore she can exempt the family. He could light the menorah, she could light the menorah. Now, why really is she obligated? I told you before that when we deal with positive time-oriented mitzvahs, we choose those 12. Women are exempted, and that would be lulav, and that would be shofar, and that would be sukkah. Generally do it, right? But they're exempt, okay? I'll tell you, women doing these mitzvahs actually is a little bit, not so simple. Are there any Sfardim here? You do positive mitzvahs? Do you make a bracha before you do the mitzvah? Oh, so you've Ashkenazized.
Sometimes, depends what.
No, you're half Ashkenazi. What? Not lulav. Okay. And you've got, your halachic structure to it. It's sort of complicated because in the Ashkenazi world, men and women have morphed into one. Okay. And there's probably something social cultural about it. But in the Sephardi world, there was this halachic distinction where there was this feeling that if indeed lulav, shofar are really traditionally male mitzvahs and women are exempt, if a woman does the mitzvah, fine. But maybe she shouldn't make a bracha. Because if it's not her mitzvah, and the bracha is, what is the bracha? Asher kitshanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu, who sanctified with us with these mitzvahs and commanded us, women weren't really commanded. So there are sections of the Sephardi world where women would not make brachas on mitzvahs asayishas man grama. There were even sections where they wouldn't perform these mitzvahs because it just wasn't really their domain. And we're not dealing with this huge envelope here. But again, it's the subject of much discussion, and it's a topic unto itself. But back to our core discussion here. So we established here that although you have these mitzvahs, and at first glance Chanukah should fall into that framework, it doesn't. She lights candles and she can exempt the family. Because we saw before when Shulchan Aruch says there are some people who can't exempt the family, he doesn't list women. He lists a child, he lists someone who is mentally challenged, but women have the same obligation as men. The question then is why? If they're exempt from positive time-oriented mitzvahs, they should be exempt from Chanukah licht as well. So I pulled Mishnah Brewer right below that, where he brings down the two classic reasons. Okay, Sha'afi chayeves ba, she is obligated in Chanukah licht the way a man is. Shanes chayegam lehem shagzeira haisa al kol psul hanases shetibo lehegmon. Women are exempt from lulav because it doesn't really celebrate the salvation of the community, men and women. It celebrates the season. The Torah tells you to take it. It celebrates agriculture, whatever it celebrates. But it doesn't celebrate salvation. Chanukah celebrates salvation. You had a terrible period. You had terrible rulers. There were terrible decrees. Those decrees were especially harsh on women. Women were violated in all sorts of terrible ways. And so, therefore, how could she not go ahead and celebrate? And so, when this mitzvah was crafted during that period by the Chachamim, it was it was applied to men, it was applied to women as well. Every young woman who would get married would be violated. It was a cruel, evil world where classic moral boundaries just didn't exist. And, these rules were in place, and the Greeks did this, okay? Or another reading that Mishnah Berurah goes ahead and shares, and these really go back to the Rishonim, to Rashi, or Ram Tosos, is that women, or a woman, was a prime architect in this specific nace. One of the great figures in Chanukah is Yehudis. The story's a little bit questionable what exactly happened. But classically, Yehudis went ahead and somehow was able to go ahead and kill a very powerful officer in the Greek army, and this ended up going ahead and being the community's salvation. So there are two different readings that go back to the Rishonim. Either they benefited, or they were primary beneficiaries of the miracle, or they were a prime force in making the miracle happen, and Yehudis, of course, is the story. And this actually evokes the story of Esther as well, where again, although women are exempt from lulav and shofar and sukkah, women are not exempt from Megillah. They're as obligated in all the Purim mitzvahs as men are. They have to hear Megillah, they have to give shlach manos. All of these things are gender neutral, because again, either if God forbid Haman Sukri would have reached the point that he wanted it to reach, the entire community would have been annihilated, or a prime force in making the miracle happen is Esther. So you have these two readings as why the obligation here was placed squarely on the shoulders of women. But what emerges is that, practically speaking, this is a women's holiday, just the way it's a man's holiday. It's as applicable to women as it is to men. Okay? But nevertheless, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to the bottom of the sheet. The fact is, somehow it sort of fell by the wayside among women. It just didn't become a woman's thing. And so, in many homes, perhaps there are some exceptions. I think a few decades ago, it was the father would light and little boys would light. Little girls generally would not. There were some select communities in Germany where perhaps this was done. You have the growth of young women lighting at home as well, but it wasn't the dominant line of thinking. And still, in most homes that I know of, if there's a husband and wife together, the husband lights, the wife does not light. Some Sofa goes ahead and questions why. If it is as applicable to women as it is to men, why didn't it catch on? Why didn't both genders celebrate it equally? So Sofa has an extraordinary idea. It might have been relevant once, perhaps it's not as relevant now. The Sofa points out that Chanukah licht were traditionally lit outside, at the entrance to the courtyard. And the community would gather together, and it would really be a communal celebration. And, if you find old courtyards in Israel during excavations, there's a groove where people would actually go ahead and 8 times a year, they would place their Chanukah licht in the wall of the courtyard. People would see the Chanukah licht when they would walk into the courtyard. And it was sort of a community getting together to do this mitzvah. Everyone would light his Chanukah licht, of course, but they would do it as a group. And in that world in which you had clear gender segregation, it made sense for the men to get together, for the women not to get together. And so Sofa says, in a world in which people lit their Chanukah licht outside, it made a lot of sense for this to become a man's thing, not a woman's thing. Now again, she has her obligation. And if a woman is alone, if the home is owned by her, there's no man living with her, she absolutely has to light. But if the obligation is an obligation on the home, and he can address it, or she can address it, it just made a lot of sense for this to become his thing. And so even eventually when it shifted into the house, in most homes, in the home I grew up in, and I replicate my parents' example, my father lit, the boys lit, my sister did not light, because this is what he remembered from back in Europe, when again they lit in the home as well. But this went back many, many generations, perhaps back to a world in which they lit outside. And so some Sofer says, the bottom of the sheet, okay, okay, so his language is a little bit, strident. But again, don't get carried away with strident language, because rabbis do things like this. It's sort of a rabbi thing sometime. So look at the bottom of the last source in Sofer. And again, take the sheets home with you. But the critical line is that last line, V'tavi atzmal dechshada. Okay, way back when people would light outside and a group would get together, and if a woman would join that group, it would just lead to chshad. Chshad means inappropriate talk or inappropriate suppositions, or just, people looking at somebody else lights badly. And he goes ahead and he says, that's inapplicable today. In most homes, people light inside their home, although in Israel there's been a reversal now, and people have reverted back to lighting outside. But certainly in his world, in Pressburg, people would light inside their home. And it's very interesting. You should know, even us, we light inside, but we place it near the window. But in many pre-war European communities, people didn't light near the window. I once asked my father if he lit near the window, and he said, Bis Meshiga? I mean, that's, I don't know how you translate Bis Meshiga into English. You can't translate it. But he said, if you would have placed the Chanukah menorah in the window, there would have been a rock coming through the window 2 minutes later. And this predates the Nazis. This was Poland before the occupation. It was a tough world. It was a brutal world. And you really, really, really had to retreat from society as a whole. And so people didn't just light inside in many communities. They lit inside away from the window. And interestingly, like my father, he's not here anymore, but all his years, he would light at the entrance to the kitchen, the doorway into the kitchen, rather than near the window. Do any of you do that, or any of your homes? Because, and this evokes a world in which there was just tremendous fear. And my father never changed. And I went to yeshiva, and they told me to do different, and I changed. And I wonder if I should regret it, because there's something beautiful about keeping your father's minhag alive. Don't change. I did, but don't. Okay? So either which way. So that's the Chassam Sofer. And then the next level, takes it even further. So there's a Maril. Let's turn the sheet over. And Mashal, Maril. Let's start with the Mashal, where he approaches the same idea from a different angle. And he points out that conceptually, even in communities in which men and women would light together, perhaps the girls would light, for some reason, if there was a husband and wife, they would not go ahead and split their candles. Now this is really interesting, because when it comes to most mitzvos, a husband does his and a wife does hers, and you don't go ahead and expect the two of them to coalesce their mitzvah and turn it into one mitzvah. But for some reason, when it comes to Chanukah Lich, there was this expectation that we would go ahead and coalesce the two into one. And so the Mashal goes ahead and tells you, turn your sheet over to the second side. Okay, it's Mashal. Let's focus on that critical line, second line of the Mashal, where he says, Ish, the Ishto. We can have discussions about men and women and sons and daughters and whether everyone should really light and just the boys should really light. But when it comes to husbands and wives, we have the two candles coalesce into one. The Ish, the Ishto, bevadi masbek lahem ner echad. There it's a whole different kettle of fish. They go ahead and one candle suffices for both of them, because there's this idea that look at the Mishnah Berurah a little bit later, where he goes ahead and he further develops this idea and he makes it contemporary. See the source right below? Levad me'ishto tehi kegufo. Because when it comes to candle lighting, husband and wife have morphed into one. Now what's really interesting, you really don't see this by other mitzvos. So there's this attempt to sort of shift a mitzvah that is really gender neutral for very good reason. It belongs both to men and women, and really shift it into a man's court. It's become almost a man's mitzvah. Now again, of course, a woman alone will light, and there are homes in which young women have begun lighting. But there was this attempt, and there were sources that validate it. When it comes to Shabbos candles, interestingly enough, you're dealing with very much the same situation. Shabbos candles are also a mitzvah in the home. Now, interestingly enough, the mitzvah might not be exactly the same. We said it's a matter of debate, but we established that Chanukah Lich, the mitzvah is to light the candles. Of course, they have to continue burning, but there's also a mitzvah activity involved in lighting the candles. Shabbos candles might be a little bit different. The focal point of the mitzvah might not be the act of lighting. It might more so be the fact that candles continue burning, that you have light. And even if you didn't go ahead and light candles, but if they're burning, you might have the essence of mitzvah. Very much akin to what I shared with you before about the candles in the Beis HaMikdash. Remember the Chazon Ish, where he goes ahead and says conceptually, if a monkey went ahead and lit the candles, that would qualify, because the objective isn't so much the act of lighting. The objective is that you should have the light. So let's assume, for the sake of our discussion, that we can say the same about Shabbos candles, that perhaps Shabbos candles, it's not so much the act of lighting that's significant, but it's more having the light burning that's significant. But for some reason, Shabbos candles have become really more of a woman's mitzvah, and in every home, I think much more so than Chanukah. Chanukah, in many homes, you do have young women lighting. You'll have Shabbos candles almost exclusively a woman lights without her husband's participation. And even in a home, and there are sections of the community, most notably Lubavitch, but there are sections of a community in which a woman lights and her daughters light as well, you're not going to have the boys lighting. It's just viewed as a man's thing. Why is that? So here, let's go ahead and turn back to the first side of the sheet, okay? And let's look a little bit, not at Hilchas Chanukah, but at Hilchas Shabbos, okay? So travel with me back to the second source from the bottom, third source from the bottom, Shulchan Aruch, okay, where Shulchan Aruch talks about Shabbos candles, and he tells you, yes, this is also gender neutral, but for some reason, this is more of a woman's domain than a man's domain. So he tells you, Anashim was haras bo yoser, women are more obligated in Shabbos with Shabbos candles, and he says, well, why is this so? So there are some practical reasons. The first is Mipnei Shemitzuyis Babayis Va'oskos B'tzarchi Abayis. Shabbos candles take place in the house. It's really, what are Shabbos candles about? They're about making the house Shabbos-tic, making sure there's adequate light, making sure that it's dignified and comfortable, making Shabbos Shabbos-tic. And if our Shabbos would be up to me in our home, we would have cornflakes Friday night. It's just what would happen. There are men more capable than I who can do all sorts of things, but many men, I'm not the only one, really just haven't developed those skills. Now maybe they haven't developed the skills because they live with good women who allow them to slack off and just hide behind whatever they do. Or maybe they're just not as competent, but for whatever reason, this ends up in most homes being more a woman's domain than a man's domain. And so Shulchan Aruch goes ahead and tells you, they're the ones who are involved in making Shabbos happen, and therefore it ends up being really her domain. Now there's another side to the equation also. Mishnah Berurah goes ahead and brings down a little bit more of a negative reading. He goes ahead and says that some of the stuff that we do on Shabbos, some of the mitzvahs that we do on Shabbos are really about making the world a better place, sort of about reversing that original sin, the Eitz Hadas, whatever happened back there in Gan Eden. And that seemed to fall more on Chava's back than Adam's back. He participated, and the snake was the bad guy who got the ball rolling. But she was the next in line, and so she bears a bit more responsibility than Adam. And so, if Shabbos is about going ahead and recreating that original state, 40, I'm supposed to stop right now, Rabbi. And I got so carried away that I didn't. Which is not a good thing to do. Rabbis do it all the time, but that means that I'm having fun. So in a sense, let me just summarize what I wanted to summarize in 5 minutes. The fact of the matter is, Shabbos was really about the home. Chanukah was really about conveying to the street. Traditionally, people lit outside. Shabbos was always inside. What ended up happening is that each gender took charge of the area that spoke to them most. The home was the woman's domain, so she ended up taking charge. The street was the man's domain. He ended up taking charge. We've shifted both back to the home. In most homes, Chanukah licht, at least here in Chutz La'aretz, are a home thing. But the culture remained, and I'm not going to get to talk about it, but it actually emerges beautifully from the Hiratzos. There's a bracha that you say when you light Chanukah candles. It talks all about impacting on the world. There's a Hiratzon you say when you light Shabbos candles. It talks all about making the home a good place. It touches upon the two mitzvahs. It displays itself in our discussion. And please God, we'll do this again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.